The Book of Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa. Section 193. I've witnessed, incognito, the gradual collapse of my life, the slow foundering of all that I wanted to be. I can say with a truth that needs no flowers to show it's dead, that there's nothing I've wanted, and nothing in which I've placed, even for a moment, the dream of only that moment, that hasn't disintegrated below my windows like a clod of dirt that resembled stone until it fell from a flower pot on a high balcony. It would even seem that fate has always tried to make me love or want things just so that it could show me on the very next day that I didn't have and could never have them. But as an ironic spectator of myself, I've never lost interest in seeing what life brings. And since I now know beforehand that every vague hope will end in dissolution, I have the special delight of already enjoying the dissolution with the hope. Like the bitter with the sweet, that makes the sweet sweeter by way of contrast. I'm a sullen strategist who, having never won a battle, has learned to derive pleasure from mapping out the details of his inevitable retreat on the eve of each new engagement. My destiny, which has pursued me like a malevolent creature, is to be able to desire only what I know I'll never get. If I see the nubile figure of a girl in the street and imagine for the slightest moment, however nonchalantly, what it would be like if she were mine, it's a dead certainty that 10 steps past my dream, she'll meet the man who's obviously her husband or lover. A romantic would make a tragedy out of this. A stranger to the situation would see it as a comedy. I, however, mix the two things, since I'm romantic in myself and a stranger to myself. And I turn the page to yet another irony. Some say that without hope life is impossible. Others say that with hope it's empty. For me, since I've stopped hoping or not hoping, life is simply an external picture that includes me, and that I look at it like a show without a plot, made only to please the eyes, an incoherent dance, a rustling of leaves in the wind, clouds in which the sunlight changes color, ancient streets that wind every which way around the city. I am in large measure the self-same prose I write. I unroll myself in sentences and paragraphs. I punctuate myself. In my arranging and rearranging of images, I'm like a child using newspaper to dress up as a king. And in the way I create rhythm with a series of words, I'm like a lunatic, adorning my hair with dried flowers that are still alive in my dreams. And above all, I'm calm, like a rag doll that has become conscious of itself, and occasionally shakes its head to make the tiny bell on top of its pointed cap, a component part of the same head, produce a sound, the jingling life of a dead man. A feeble notice to fate. But how often, in the middle of this peaceful dissatisfaction, my conscious emotion is slowly filled with a feeling of emptiness and tedium for thinking this way. How often I feel as if hearing a voice behind intermittent sounds that I myself am the underlying bitterness of this life so alien to human life, a life in which nothing happens except its self-awareness. How often, waking up for a moment from this exile that's me, I get a glimpse of how much better it would be to be a complete nobody. The happy man who at least has real bitterness, the contented man who feels fatigue instead of tedium, who suffers instead of imagining he suffers, who kills himself, yes, instead of watching himself die. I've made myself into the character of a book, a life one reads. Whatever I feel is felt against my will so that I can write that I felt it. Whatever I think is promptly put into words mixed with images that undo it, cast into rhythms that are something else altogether. From so much self-revising, I've destroyed myself. From so much self-thinking, I'm now my thoughts and not I. I plumbed myself and dropped the plumb. I spend my life wondering if I'm deep or not, with no remaining plumb, except my gaze that shows me, blackly vivid in the mirror at the bottom of the well, my own face that observes me observing it. I'm like a playing card belonging to an old and unrecognizable suit, the sole survivor of a lost deck. I have no meaning. I don't know my worth. There's nothing I can compare myself with to discover what I am. And to make such a discovery would be of no use to anyone. And so, describing myself in image after image, not without truth, but with lies mixed in, I end up more in the images than in me, stating myself until I no longer exist, writing with my soul for ink, useful for nothing except writing. But the reaction ceases, and again I resign myself. I go back to whom I am, even if it's nothing. And a hint of tears that weren't cried makes my stiff eyes burn. A hint of anguish that wasn't felt gets caught in my dry throat. But I don't even know what I would have cried over if I cried, nor why it is that I didn't cry over it. The fiction follows me like my shadow. And what I want is to sleep. Section 194. A terrible weariness fills the soul of my heart. I feel sad because of whom I never was. And I don't know with what kind of nostalgia I miss him. I fell with every sunset against my hopes and certainties. Section 195. There are people who truly suffer because they weren't able in real life to live with Mr. Pickwick or to shake Mr. Wardle's hand. I'm one of those people. I've wept genuine tears over that novel for not having lived in that time and with those people, real people. The disasters of novels are always beautiful because the blood in them isn't real blood, and those who die in them don't rot, nor is rottenness rotten in novels. When Mr. Pickwick is ridiculous, he's not ridiculous, for it all happens in a novel. Perhaps the novel is a more perfect life and reality, which God creates through us. Perhaps we live only to create it. It seems that civilizations exist only to produce art and literature. Words are what we speak for them and remain. How do we know that these extra-human figures aren't truly real? It tortures my mind to think this might be the case.